by John Craig. Chief political correspondent Damian Green has condemned abuse against politicians, in a speech in which he also cruelly mocked many of his senior colleagues. Theresa May's closest political ally warned about increasing hatred in politics, while at the same time telling colourful jokes about top Tories. He suggested online abuse could lead to another MP being murdered and, without naming them, criticised former London mayors Ken Livingstone and Boris Johnson for talking about Hitler. Speaking to political journalists at Westminster, he said if mainstream politicians and journalists start to behave like Twitter trolls and conspiracy theorists, then democracy is in danger. I do think we need to respect each other's motives and treat each other's views with courtesy. If we don't, we risk feeding an atmosphere of increasing hatred which at the most horrible extremes led to an event like the killing of Jo Cox. That was the serious message from the first Secretary of State. But there were plenty of jokes, with his top target George Osborne, the former Chancellor and now editor of London's Evening Standard newspaper. So I know that Theresa May is to blame for England cricketer Ben Stokes' nightlife, Hurricane Ophelia, and the fact that week after week with her as Prime Minister in November the sun shines for a smaller time every day, he said. And then he quit the Evening Standard Russia Today with less George Galloway. Image. The minister said online abuse could lead to another MP such as Jo Cox being murdered. Another target was the Tory MP Heidi Allen, who threatened to lead a backbench rebellion on universal credit benefit changes this week, before backing down. Cross-party friendships are much more common than social media would suggest, said Mr. Green. I've even seen evidence that Heidi Allen will collaborate with other Conservatives. And there was a dig at Conservative backbencher Jacob Rees-Mogg, the new darling of Tory activists. The political world is stalked by unlikely personalities who seem to come from alien worlds that political journalists have never had to enter before, he said. Trump, Macron, Jacob. Image. Boris Johnson was a target for the PM's de facto deputy. The next target was the Tories' blunt-speaking Australian campaign guru Lynton Crosby, blamed by many Conservative MPs for the snap general election fiasco in June. I've only just recovered from the election campaign, said Mr. Green. I found that every time I did a TV or radio interview, my phone afterwards would be full of the most explicit personal criticism, using violent and insulting language. But Lynton's got over it now. Turning to his serious message, Mr. Green attacked websites such as The Canary, Squawkbox and Breitbart and said the level of online abuse aimed at MPs was appalling. He said it did not reflect the reality of life in the House of Commons, where MPs frequently worked with political opponents on a cross-party basis. I think everyone, before they go in studs up on a political opponent, needs to think long and carefully about whom they are talking to, he said. It might play well with your own troops to give an opponent a big kicking on the latest microsite, but perhaps it behoves us all to ask who's reading it and what are they going to do next. Image. George Osborne's Evening Standard was compared to Russia Today, no doubt referring to Mr. Livingstone and Mr. Johnson. Mr. Green said we have in the past few years witnessed a sad and completely ridiculous rise in routine comparisons to Hitler and the Nazis. It is symptomatic not just of a decline, but of a rapidly increasing viciousness in our discourse which is totally out of kilter with what I see day after day in the House of Commons. Mr. Green also told a joke at his own expense, saying he saw his role as the Prime Minister's de facto deputy as the government's general fixer. My job is to make sure that my colleagues stay united and show the public a great unity of purpose, spirit and message, he said. It's all going terribly well.